5,000 to 8,000 visitors, of which probably 80 to 90% are Mexican. So we would go there, we would put stands, and we'd be there handing out flyers, signing up people. And really that's how we started getting our first customers. That's probably how we got to 200, 300.
This is SEON x Felix Pago. Here, CEO, founder, Bernardo Garcia tells us Felix Pago's story in his own words and explains the obstacles the company overcame while trying to be a force for good.
I am Bernardo Garcia, and I'm a co-founder of Felix Pago. So in a nutshell, Felix Pago is a WhatsApp-based remittances service from the US to Latin America, powered by blockchain and AI. So what that means is really we'll help Latin American immigrants in the US be able to provide money for their families abroad in the power of just a WhatsApp conversation in seconds and immediately. Our main users are Mexican immigrants, people that came to the US, within the last 5 to 10 years. Really people that come here with the goal of working for about 10 years, moving as much money back home as they can, so they can either build a house, start a business, or something like that, to be able to move back to Mexico and continue their lives. So the why is we believe there's no real solutions out there that truly solve the problem of sending money cross-border. Really, this is because there's two types of players today in the market. First, you have the traditional players, companies like Western Union, like MoneyGram, that are very widely known, and they're very known for having massive retail footprints all over the world. Plus, they get charged hidden fees on exchange rates, which then just makes it complicated because people have to walk, and they have to get in line, then they pay all those fees, and it's just horrible. All those companies collectively have a very small share of the market, all combined less than, Western Union. And so really no one has actually done a good job at bringing people to the digital world. And that's really where we come in. We essentially want to convince people that digital makes sense, but we want to make it in their own terms. And their own terms is everyone is on WhatsApp. So leverage that, especially when you're pitching to US investors. Everyone's like, what, are you crazy? Why WhatsApp? Because for some reason, no one in the US uses WhatsApp except for immigrants. And so in our case, it's pretty much that. Like WhatsApp penetration in Latin America is anywhere from 60 to 80%, depending on the country. Trust is the game in our industry. You can have the best tech, you can have the most beautiful product, but if people cannot trust you, you're never going to convince them. So, and plus, we're dealing with a target customer that is less trustworthy than your average customer. So that is very challenging. Imagine today, 75% of the people that are sending money, they experience going to a store. And really, when you ask them, what do you like about the store? I guess you can ask them, what do you like and what do you hate? On the hate, they'll tell you, I hate to commute, I hate to pay high fees. But on the likes, they will tell you, I like that there's a human being behind the counter that is doing the transaction for me. Because essentially, if anything goes wrong, I come to this person and I say, there was something wrong, can you help me fix it? If I need to cancel a transaction, I go to them. If the money can't be found, I ask them. So there's always a human in person. Anyone that has a question can get it solved immediately by the person on the spot. There's a lot of people trying to do scams on WhatsApp, where they're just like sending you random things like, open this and click this, and everyone knows that there's a lot of scams in WhatsApp. And in a way I see it, like, I remember, maybe it was 20 years ago when Hotmail was a thing and you started getting, at first you actually communicated via email. Eventually you just got so much spam on your Hotmail and so many links that you thought had some viruses in them or whatever. Me and my co-founder Manuel, we met in business school. In the very early days of business school, we essentially both had ideas that we wanted to start companies. And so naturally having beers, as also Latinos commonly do, we started talking about wanting to do companies and all the possible ideas we had, not trying to judge the other's idea, but we were actually building upon the same thing. So essentially knowing that we wanted to focus on Latinos, financial services, eventually in a class in business school, we saw this number, this chart essentially that showed that remittances had surpassed foreign direct investment globally, which meant it was the largest source of capital in emerging markets. And for us, and it's one of those charts that no one cares about, but for us is that aha moment, like, wow, I've sent money to Mexico so many times, and every time I do it, it's so horrible. But as a consumer, you just do it, but you never stop to think, why is it horrible and why should I fix it? But then when you're soul searching for an idea, it suddenly makes sense. Then why Felix was built the way it was really trial and error. We started with an app, and we said, we're going to be a Remitly, but it's going to be in Spanish, and it's going to be easy, and it's going to have the slang, and people hated it. And then we moved to web, and it was the same thing, and like people hated it again. And then WhatsApp eventually, we just realized was already a part of the remittance process, because people, when they walked out of the store after sending cash, they had a paper receipt, and then they took a picture with their phone, and they would send that image to their family member in Mexico over WhatsApp. And that's really when it clicked, like, oh, let's do it here. One of us was on the street, literally asking people when they were in the line of the Western Union or whatever, like, hey, do you want me to help you? I can do it for you right now. And then the other one was in a coffee shop a block or two away, just like being a chatbot or a chat agent. And really that's where we got the first customers. And we did that for a few months. We had about 40 customers that we had recruited in our different visits to these communities. We realized that everyone kept coming back. On a good day, on the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, it can have 5,000 to 8,000 visitors, of which probably 80 to 90% are Mexican. So we would go there, we would put stands, and we'd be there handing out flyers, signing up people. And really that's how we started getting our first customers. That's probably how we got to 200, 300. On the very early days, you saw, just normal people doing transactions with normal behaviors, and eventually them doing things like chargebacks and stuff. It would happen once in a while, and that's just normal things to see, I guess. People call their bank and say, I don't recognize this. We would learn that some instances people were doing a mistake because they just didn't recognize the charge or whatnot. But then obviously as we started growing and doing more marketing, especially social media and stuff, you then start to see more organized stuff happening that at first you don't, at least me personally, I had never experienced anything on fraud. So you start seeing these waves and you're like, this is very strange. People coming in via organic channels, say they just wrote out of the blue. And then as they started going through the flow, they were doing a perfect flow, which is also typically unlikely. Like people take time to become familiar with the product and to decide, is this something I want to trust or not? But then you would see like they're determined, they're going fast through the onboarding process. And then you get to the point where you're doing KYC and you start seeing these names, like names in English or in other languages. And you're like, this is very strange because we send money to Mexico. Like, what do people with non-Latin names, what business do they have to want to use my platform? And that's really when we realized, okay, fraud is actually very important. We realized there was this group of Colombians that were trying to send crazy amounts of money using duplicate cards. Lucky for us is we implemented SEON on the early days. Yeah, and so it's really when you start seeing these things happen at larger scale that you realize how really important it is. And it's not like, okay, fraud is important. No, it's part of the core of the business, something to take care of. I think it was a Tuesday night, 11 p.m. Eastern time, and suddenly the ops manager calls in and says, man, we're under attack. We're like, wow, what's going on? And so we go in the chat and we see chat after chat after chat after chat. And that's just very weird because we're typically dealing with people sending throughout the day. And yeah, you see some people send at night, but about 20 people at once. And so yeah, we were under attack. And we started calling some of these people just to like do sort of like a live KYC or recognition of what's happening, who are they? And the constant we saw, like it was a group of Colombians that essentially had figured out a way to send money through us. And at that point, I remember it was 3 or 4 of us just going to SEON and opening the cases and trying to figure out what do these people have in common. And then you start seeing like they're in the same IP address, they're using similar devices that are very strange devices. We're seeing that they're using similar cards, they're repeating cards, probably stolen. And yeah, that's really when we figured out we had to do much more about it. Today, we're a 15-person startup. And so that means each of us has like 3 full-time jobs. And, risk and fraud has been part of the job of like 3 or 4 people, but none of us are experts. And so we need to rely on the experts, obviously, to get the basics there. And so obviously when we started seeing this bad behavior, we needed help ASAP. So like, how do we set rules? And then I see you're doing some suggestions based on your AI to like things that we could implement that should take care of problems right away. And so then literally just, we were having the problem on one side, on the other, we're chatting on Slack with the customer success team. And we're saying like, these things are happening, can we jump on a call quickly? The team was super responsive right away. In no time, we were having a call. They were helping us set up rules, telling us things to look for, pointers. And so really just having that support in a time of need, it's just something really, really important. Pricing was, at the beginning, it was a big factor in deciding to work with you. Because, a lot of platforms, you look at them and they're charging you like if you were Google or Stripe or, a massive company. And obviously a startup just cannot afford to do that. You're not going to spend 25% of your investment in fraud upfront when you don't even have transactions going on yet. And so your pricing works really well because the fixed part is just super manageable. And then as you grow, you start paying more, obviously. But then when you think about that from a P&L perspective, it's just a fixed cost of operation, cost per transaction or per new customer. So it's something that you can very easily manage at a larger scale. So it'll never be out of control, I guess. So this startup, essentially, they tried to do something similar to us. They scaled really, really fast. And then, in a matter of a month or two, they went bust because of fraud. Essentially, they had so many chargebacks that killed them. And it happened very, very fast. In our case, I guess luckily enough, the way that we decided to scale was take it slow at first because everything had yet to be built and we're building on the side. And so fraud started growing, I guess, at a reasonable pace that we could control. And again, good thing that we did is we invested in tools like SEON upfront so that when the problem was there, we already had what we needed to fight it. So what I would tell really anyone that's in the payment space is that fraud is that thing that you don't think about when you're building the business, but is the thing that could very easily kill it in a matter of no time. And you cannot just like come in and plug the solution in a week because it breaks absolutely all your processes. So something to think when you're building from the beginning.